Hi, friends. Thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach podcast. Today, I have brought my dear friend and colleague, Kaylee Blair, back on the podcast. I'm so excited and definitely am so comfortable with her that I didn't write out any questions, just wrote down the topics and also didn't even write an intro. So I will link to the other episodes where Kaylee shared more of her story in depth. I didn't even think to look up which ones those are. So if you're listening, go back and look, you will see them, or look in the show notes and I'll link to which ones I had Kaylee on where I did an interview with her, but you will have heard her in other episodes as well, where she helped me do some of the interviewing. So Kaylee and I are good buddies, both. She's a brain injury coach. I call myself a concussion coach. We are doing the help people with brain injuries thing together, and we love it. And yeah, Kaylee, is there anything else you want to tell people about you that I forgot? Sorry.
No, excited to be here as always. Your podcasts are always great. I actually just today was looking because I was going to share a podcast with some people that I work with, and I looked at your latest one and I was like, "Whoa, that sounds really cool." I just feel like you always have cool people.
Thanks. I do have cool people like you, and it's so fun.
Oh.
I love this. It's
I meant to set it up that way.
You're good. You're good. No, but I really do. I love getting to talk to people, hear inspiring stories, and learn about what cool things people are doing to help people in the world. So just so all of you listening can know, I wanted to bring Kaylee on again just to share a little bit more of her history, like some more specifics of things that she experienced that I think would be helpful for people to know about, and also to share some of the updates and things that she's learning and doing now. And yeah, so we have some good topics to cover here. So I'm excited for this conversation. So I think this episode is going to come out after we have put out the episode that we just recently did together with Brenda.
Yeah.
About orthobionomy. So you guys can listen to that one as well. In that one, we kind of mentioned some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about today, but it's all good. You can hear it again. So Kaylee has, as part of her experience with brain injury, had a couple of things that I think would be helpful for people to hear about. And actually, since not everyone will have heard these other ones, why don't you give us like a super summarized version of what happened? Like 2 sentences, ready, go.
Okay.
With your brain injuries.
Oh, with the first and the second?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. First injury occurred in 2017. Woke up from a routine surgery, not on my brain, with a brain injury. Felt like somebody took a snow globe, put it upside down, and kept it there. So everything was off. Stuttering, couldn't logically think, couldn't control emotions. Balance was extremely off. I stuttered really intensely. Couldn't handle myself in any situation. Couldn't really remember to eat, let alone sometimes breathing hurt. So very complicated, very not fun. That was the first one. Second one was in 2020. That one, I went to a routine visit to a chiropractor, and he did a new technique on my neck that ended up 30 minutes later causing me to lose gross and fine motor skill in my body, and shot extreme pain from my neck to the rest of my body. causing my whole body to shake nonstop for probably about 5 or 6 days solidly. And then from there, it slowly developed into what I decided to term shake and bakes, which we can talk about.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. And you wanted to do a disclaimer. Sorry, I didn't give you a chance to do that first. What is your disclaimer with this?
Yeah, I sometimes, for some reason, these are such unique situations. I still believe in chiropractic care, but it's definitely something I know you got to do a lot of research on. Basically, just because something happened to me doesn't mean it's going to happen to you. Obviously, I'm sure you guys know that too, but I just want to put that out there. I don't share these stories to instill any fear about if you need to get a procedure done, you have to do a procedure, And if you got to do a chiropractor, just check your research and check your gut and make sure you know what you're doing. So,
yeah, thank you. And also maybe you should have said this before I had you share your story too, but want to do like trigger warning for people as well that yes, we're going to be talking about things that are challenging. And so if the conversation is too heavy, then don't hesitate to turn it off and come back to it later, or not if you don't want to. That's totally fine too. We just, again, the point of all of this, of the podcast in general, is to bring hope and light and quality information to people. So that is the goal. And one of the ways that I do that is by having people share their experiences. And we're talking about hard things that people go through. So there's going to be bad with the good and dark with the light going on here. So we'll throw that out there as well. So let's talk a little bit more about the shake and bakes, if that's okay, as you have decided to call them, which I think is clever and cute, but hiding the fact that it's something that's really challenging. So tell us about what that means, what it does to your body, and if you have figured out what it is. Because I don't know that I've heard other people talk about this specifically.
So I guess, so we'll talk. Okay. So shake and bakes themselves, it kind of developed over a year. So it would start off, I think my first experience was like a 30-second window so after those first 5 days, forgive me, go back. After those first 5 days of constant muscle shaking, cramping, which if you've ever experienced a cramp, having it in your whole body for 5 days straight, it's not fun.
Would you describe it like, if someone was looking at you, did it look like you were having a seizure or something? That's what I'm picturing when you say
like calmly. It's not thrashing, but it's like your legs will shake, your hands will shake, your head will shake, your shoulders, your body. It'll
like just a tremor?
Yeah, but it feels like consistently.
And does it feel like a Charlie horse? Like, do you feel like your muscles are like cramps? I think of a Charlie horse. It's like cramping. Like
Charlie horse is more extreme. I'd say it's like a half Charlie horse, but all around your body. Type of feeling.
And is it, sorry, more questions. Is it inconsistent as far as like where and when and how long? So like, is that why is your body shaking in different ways, or is it kind of like a whole body at the same time?
In those first 5 days, it was different from the rest of my experience. Those first 5 days, it was really intense and just kind of all over, and it would trade off where it would go, but typically it would impact all my gross and fine motor movements as well. So slowly, eventually, the shakiness stopped. That's why I say it took about 5 days for it to eventually calm down. But then it got to a place where, for instance, like I remember the first time I went to go grab my toothbrush, and I told my hand to go one direction, and I grabbed my toothbrush, and instead of bringing it to my mouth, it just like went all the way back out here or something. And I was like, that's not where I wanted that to go. And so it was like there was a disconnect between my brain and my body. Stairs, I had to relearn stairs. I could compute what they were. I had been really good with stairs before, but the way that I walked when the physiatrist first saw me, probably a week after the injury, he described it as it looked almost like I had Parkinson's. So like my feet were shuffling, I was limping. It took conscious effort to make every movement. So
was this when you were still in that 5 days span, or was this later? Okay.
Yeah. So then eventually, he set me up with intensive therapy. First injury to second injury, I definitely found the right doctor right away, the right specialist. I didn't even know if a physiatrist existed. And he sent me right away to a neuro rehab where I had intensive speech and occupational therapy and physical therapy almost every day for a good while. And shout out to my amazing family, and because they had to drive me. I couldn't drive myself. I couldn't turn my neck. I couldn't do a lot of things. But if you fast forward, so a lot of my symptoms, so some of my old symptoms from my previous injury came back, like the stuttering came back a little bit. Some of the cognitive stuff came back, but most of the extreme things went away after 2 months. After about 2 months, I was able to carefully take care of myself. I remember the first time I attempted to straighten my hair, it took me over 2 hours and I was sobbing by the end because I was in so much pain. It's hard because people a lot of times don't understand what that's like. So anyways, so I guess that's one of the reasons I'm happy to share this story, because the more awareness we bring, the better off. Anyways.
Yes.
So then eventually it got to the point where one day randomly I was sitting at my desk, and for about 30 seconds, I felt this extreme pain. It felt like somebody was electrocuting me from the neck on. And it was all of a sudden I was tremoring, and I lost function of my arms, and my legs were tremoring, and it started to feel a little bit like a seizure. And I was panicking. So I was like, I don't know what's happening here. I am losing control over my body, physical function. And I think I had been on the phone with my mom at the time. And at that time, I also had been living at my sister's house in her basement because when COVID hit, my lease went crazy. Anyways, so there I was. And so my mom hung up, called my sister. She ran downstairs, and what a blessing it was that she was home actually at that moment. But she was so amazing during that whole experience. But she just hugged me. She didn't know what else to do. And I was like, can you just, like, it feels like my body's disconnected from my brain. Can you just like rub my arms and maybe just give me a hug? And she did. And that kind of helped flip the switch a little bit for me. And I was like, oh, okay.
This
that was
is where
weird.
my body is in space. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that helped. And then from there, it kind of progressed. Eventually, it got to more than 30 seconds. It started going backwards, right? Instead of getting better, it started getting worse until eventually, I guess I could fast forward to, there's so many experiences. There's 2 experiences I can think of that might be beneficial for other people to hear. Do you want me to share those, or do you want me to share one?
Yeah, let's hear it. But first, I want some clarifying. I have some clarifying questions.
Yes.
Did from the times, like when you had that initial, like the first of what you call the shake and bakes, like different from the initial 5 days worth, was that after you had finished all of your therapies and the intensive stuff that you were doing, or was that like during the same time?
I believe about so I had started doing a bunch of intensive testing surrounding my neck because my neurophysical therapist had discovered I had tested positive for a certain test where when they move your neck a certain way, you almost pass out. Can't remember what that's called, but it has to deal with a certain artery, vertebral artery, I think. And I failed the test basically. And he was like, you're not presenting well anyways. I think we need to stop therapy. You need to go see a neurologist. So I went to a neurologist. She sent me to the vein specialist people. I went there. I did all sorts of testing. I did try a couple different medications. This is as the shake and bakes were progressing. I tried to follow my neurologist as far as I could go, wherever she told me to go. And I even did like a nerve conduction study test. That came back. Everything was coming back normal. They couldn't figure out why I was experiencing those symptoms. I don't remember how many MRIs I did of my brain and my neck, but
that's got to be so frustrating.
Yeah. Eventually she dumped me. She broke up with me.
She broke up with you.
I remember that day.
It weren't working out.
She's like, I'm so sorry. I don't know what else to do for you. And so I went to my car and I sobbed and was like, okay, Heavenly Father, like, what's next? What do I do here? And I just had this inspiration to do something out of the box. I started using infrared saunas, and somehow that started to help a process in me. I don't know, but random.
I love it. I think that's I think access to
to inspiration from God is going to be really ultimately the best way to guide medical treatment, since he created bodies and knows how to do things. And not to say that it's not a good idea to go to medical treatment. Definitely follow that route. Like it sounds like you did that, right? Like you were trying all of the things. And so, but I do think that God can direct us in these things. So I think I paused you and you were going to say a couple things that you thought would be helpful for people to hear in regards to the shake and bakes.
Sure. I guess, yeah. So there was one time in particular where I'm hoping that it will help if somebody's listening to this and you do experience these seizure-like episodes and you're unsure of how to help it. One thing that I started to develop, because I did start to go to an upper cervical specialized chiropractor eventually down the line. And I interrogated that guy like nobody's business. And
before you started working with him,
made sure. Yeah. Anyways, but yeah. So one experience I had, I went for a gentle walk with my cute sister's dog and a little golden doodle named Scout. And I was just trying to walk the block because it was a healthy thing to do as you're trying to rebuild that muscle memory. And nobody was home at my sister's house. It was just me and the dog, and I had been doing pretty good that day. But about halfway through the walk, I started to feel the sensation of, uh-oh. And whenever I would feel a sensation like that, it was almost as if I could see a switch in my brain, and that was the switch. And if it got flipped off, that meant the shake and bake was happening, which was interesting that I mentally developed that. And I can explain more behind that later, but I realized I was a little bit in trouble. So I was trying to do anything I could to distract and just let the muscle memory work rather than me get worked up that something was about to happen. So called any of my sisters or siblings until somebody answered, and my cute sister Carrie Ann answered, and I explained what was going on as calmly as I could. And she said, okay. And I said, can you distract me, please, while I try to get home before this happens? And she's like, yeah, what are we talking about? Let's go. So she started talking about all the things. I don't even remember what she talked about. And I talked with her until I couldn't anymore, because eventually when it would hit, I couldn't talk. I was always completely aware, but I couldn't really talk. Anyways.
And were you able to remain upright? It wasn't like a full-on seizure where you fall over?
Sometimes. So in this instance, I got to my sister's house and I got to where I could lean up against the garage door and I could look at the stairs. But at that point, my brain couldn't compute how to get me up the stairs. And so I couldn't talk on the phone anymore. That became too exhausting. And the pain was starting to come and increase. And I'm a prayer. So I'm praying and seeking to stay calm and just allow, like, it needs to happen, it needs to happen. And then I think my sister's dog, Scout, I think he must have recognized something was wrong, right? I let him off his leash because he knew how to go home. And then he came back. He saw me standing there and he would go up the stairs to the door and then he would come back down to me. And then he would go up to the stairs to the door and come back down to me. And then something clicked in my brain and I went, oh, maybe if I don't think about it and I follow how Scout is going up the stairs, I think I could do it. So I did. So I had just enough oomph to go up the stairs, open the front door, close the door. And just as I closed the door, I fell over. I was like, I fell over and I kind of laughed because I was like, made it, like safe.
Oh, and this is win.
Yep.
Wow.
And then I had practiced. I built up. I realized what I was experiencing wasn't something that one other person could handle or should handle to help me. And so I think one of the hardest things for me was admitting that and recognizing that I needed the help and that my sweet sister I was living with, I shouldn't place that all on her. And so I created a support group. I specifically texted or called different family members and friends and said, hey, this is what's happening. I call them shake and bakes. Every once in a while, they just happen. And sometimes I get into trouble. Sometimes I'm at the temple or on a walk or at the grocery store or, you just don't really know. And sometimes I need a ride home, or I need somebody to pick me off the ground and help me get to my room, or something like that. And it took some time, and it took me being willing to humble myself, and also to talk with my amazing sister and say, hey, this isn't something anybody's asked for. I love you. Please know that I'm building up a support group of people that I can call upon, so I don't have to just call on you. Mm-hmm. And if I remember right, she might correct me if she ever listens to this, but if I remember right, it was a bit of a challenge for her because she wanted to be there every time something happened, which says a lot about her, right? But I knew that for her sake and her 4 kids' sake and her husband's sake, I needed to try my best to invite other people into this horrible situation I was in and allow that.
I appreciate you bringing that up. And I know that's something in the coaching that we do together that has been important that you've brought to the table. Like, it is important to encourage people to build out their support crew. And just, and I think you explained well why and how that was helpful for you. So thank you for sharing that and bringing that up. I love that the dog was aware of you, and that, like, I love that experience that you shared with the dog. I think that's so cool. And this wasn't like a trained therapy dog or anything, right? It's a dog doing its dog thing. They have, I think, senses, and that's why we do have therapy dogs. And I will just throw out there, if people haven't listened to the episode where I interviewed Matt, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his last name. It starts with a T. I'll link to that one as well. Dang it. Sorry, Matt. You're amazing. But he talks about his experience with, is it Treywick? Now I'm like going to bug myself. Sorry. Matt T. He talks about his experience with getting a
service animal?
Service dog. Yeah, I was going to say therapy dog, but it's a service dog who will alert to his seizures and things like that. And like, she's been a lifesaver for him. And so if people are dealing with this kind of physical experience with their after concussion experience, that might be something to look into. So just, thanks for bringing that up, even though I know that wasn't necessarily the point of the story, but I think it's really cool. Animals can be very helpful. And I'm curious really quickly, I know you're calling them shake and bakes. It sounds seizure-ish. Was there a name for it? Like, did you get an official diagnosis from any professionals or anything like that?
Nope. Everybody was like, this isn't like anything we've really seen.
Okay. They didn't call it a seizure. I assume, like you said, you couldn't drive, but if it wasn't an official seizure, did you have to, were you self-restricting on that, or were you legally not allowed to drive? Like, how did that work? I'm just curious.
I refused to drive for a good while, until I got to the point where I could have tell signs of when a shake and bake was coming or not. And then I allowed it cautiously. So I self-restrained where I could.
And you did get to a point where it was, I know with seizures, they talk about people having an aura or whatever, like there is some warning sign ahead of time. Sounds like you did have signs that you could recognize. How far in advance would you know it was coming on?
Long enough to know when to pull over, or know when to pull up the white flag and say, actually, I need a ride home. This didn't work out the way I thought it would, which happens to everybody. Nobody, you're trying to gauge an impossible thing. And half the time you're right, but half the time you're not, it's okay. Okay,
cool. Well, thank you for sharing that. So what else? Tell me more about, what was the other experience that you wanted to make sure that is put out there?
Well, I was just thinking probably one of the most traumatic experiences I had with a shake and bake. It was my personal record, which I wish I never had. On the 24th of July, I was with some family. We were at an event, and I turned to my sister and I was like, crap. And we're in the middle of this field, bunch of people. There's a concert going on. There's going to be fireworks later, right? And she was like, it's okay. Just let it be. It's okay. And I had all of my family there, which not a lot of them had ever even known that I was what I was truly experiencing. It's hard to really know until you see it. And then when people see it, I go, oh, sorry. What do you need? But anyways, that one, I lost control again and was shaking really bad, really intensely, and it wouldn't stop. An hour passed. Eventually, they called over the EMTs and they had to get me onto a stretcher and roll me out. And the EMTs got me into the ambulance and they said, look, the hospital's not really going to have much to do for you. They won't have much to help you. It's up to you. Do you want to still go or do you want to just go home? And I turned to my sister because at that point I'm not talking very well, right? I'm exhausted. And she's like, Kaylee, I feel like we need to take you home. We got to figure something out. And at this point I had just been introduced to this upper cervical specific chiropractor. And he had happened to give me his cell phone number, which most don't do that. And I was like, maybe we need to try calling him. I didn't know what was to expect with that. But again, it was this inspiration. It was absolutely inspiration. And they managed to somehow get me into a car. And my sister Mindy was holding me up because I couldn't hold myself up anymore. And I was having trouble remembering to breathe at that point because it had been probably about 2 hours at that point. So then it would finally get me home after interrupting everybody's 24th of July.
I love that that's what you're concerned about. You're so sweet.
I just felt bad. And yeah, anyway, so we get there and finally get into the house and I'm laying back. I'm reminding myself to breathe, but it's still happening. It's probably been about 3 hours at this point. And extremely excruciating, right? And my brother, I think it was my brother, got through to this doctor, Dr. McIntyre. And he goes, hey, I live in Draper. I had this feeling to stay home from this vacation this weekend and I'm on my way down. So he came down that night, it took him about a half hour. He did this very gentle, it was very gentle. He never twisted or turned anything. He just did a gentle tapping motion with my neck and my shake and bake stopped. And I was like, oh, what a relief. Like, thank you.
Yeah.
So glad you were here. Why did you stay home? What happened there? And anyways, that was some pretty divine guidance and help there. So when the ambulance turns you away, you're like, what do you do there? So I started to see him for treatment, which was a journey in and of itself. And then eventually I moved on to other things because it felt like my body got what it needed to from that. And I had to move on to other things to further my progression. It did stunt my ability to exercise as I wanted to. But I always typically, when I talk to people, I did talk about how I felt like I was 80 to 90% healed because I was able to walk, I was able to talk, I was able to do 90% of the things that I needed to do in life. It was just these pesky shake and bakes that would happen. There were some members of the congregation that I belong to, right? That were also extremely helpful. And throughout the whole experience, they would come on a whim and just help lift me up wherever I was and get me to my room. And they knew the drill. Some of the kindest people. And yeah, so that's kind of the other story I wanted to share was that other one. But yeah, so then I found some other therapies and things to help me heal further.
And I think it is a cool and important point also that to note that you can work with something, it can be really helpful, and then you can move on to something else. Like the healing journey is a journey, and there will be providers and helpers that come in and out of it, and that's okay. And in talking to so many people, that's a consistent thing that comes up is like, we want a one and done, like let's just fix it and be done. But most frequently is okay, we're doing this and it helps and I got this out of it and I'm in a much better place. And then I'm going to try this other thing and see how much further I can get. And it just like seems to be the way of it. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Just thinking about how I think one thing that can be a common theme is when to just accept where you're at and when to have hope. And that's been something that I have battled in myself a lot because throughout both of the injuries that I had and relearning how to walk again and all of the things again, I just had this determination and hope that something better was coming because why not? That was what I decided. However, even that kind of hope can have a little bit of, I don't want to say toxicity, but kind of to it if you're not willing to accept where you're at. And so I've been pondering this concept of finding acceptance in hope and finding hope in acceptance. So when you fully accept something, it actually opens you up to being able to have the hope to change that something. And then when you are hoping for something, you can accept where you're at as you were hoping for that something. It's like the two-way street, essentially, right? I don't know if that made much sense, but that's kind of been my working theory.
I like it. I do. And I do think that it makes sense. And I think both of those are key. Like it's so true. And it's kind of like this analogy. I don't know if actually I'm going to go for it, even though I'm not sure if it's going to apply. We're just going to start talking, see if it comes around. But I like this analogy that I've heard Jodie Moore use, where she talks about like, if you're using a GPS and you're like, you want to get to a certain destination, you plug in where you're at, and Siri or your GPS or whatever doesn't sit there and berate you for where you're at. Like, oh, I can't believe that's where you are. Like, how come you're not so much closer to this other place that you're going to? Or like, it just is like, oh, okay, here you are. And this is the path to get to where you want to be. Like, it's very like non-judgmental. And I think that's kind of, we need to do that for ourselves. And obviously we wish that it was like, oh yeah, do this and this and this, and we'll get exactly where you want to be. We wish that was the case with the healing journey, but the concept of, okay, oh, this is where you are, that like, we just accept it. Like, this is what's happening right now. And therefore we're going to be looking at these other things to move forward. I think that can be a helpful perspective, and also just encouragement to drop the judgment about wherever you're at. Like, it's especially with something like this, like a concussion, where there's so much that's out of your hands. Like, when we fight against the thing that we don't have any control over, then we're just, it doesn't help. So yeah, I appreciate that hope and acceptance and hope. Thank you for sharing that. And as I know you mentioned that you did the neurology stuff, you did this upper cervical chiropractor, and then you were led into other things. If there's anything, I know people would probably be interested in hearing, as you're looking back, what your pathway was. If you wouldn't mind, just again, a broad overview. We don't have to go into all of them, but what things were helpful for you along the way that might be something for people to look into? Yeah,
I utilized, I don't know the exact term for it, because at the time we got it, I was dealing with an intense injury, but lasers. So like red, often people are familiar with red laser therapy, but this had red, blue, and green lasers to it. First time I had been exposed to it, they had put the lasers, they had done it on my neck. And for the first time, that was within the first week of getting the injury. For the first time, for a whole hour, I went without shaking and stuttering, which was a huge deal for me because that was extremely painful. And I was very blessed at the time that my parents were bound and determined to figure out where they got that device, and they wanted to purchase it. And so I have that, and I use that periodically. That's been helpful.
That's really cool. Was it at a chiropractor clinic? Is that where you first were introduced to it? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think Premier Wellness is the name of the clinic that I had gone to that week.
I know I just did an interview with Dr. Crowley up here in Farmington, and he's a huge fan of lasers, and that he's found that it makes a huge difference for people with concussions as well. Zirconia lasers is the one that he likes. That's the brand.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah, they definitely have a lot of cool research coming out about lasers and how they can benefit. Another key player for me was infrared saunas. Infrared saunas were huge. They helped a lot. Not only did it help my body feel just this relief from all of the inflammation that I was dealing with at the time, did an injury and all of the stuff that gets mixed up when you have a nervous system injury. So that helped a lot. Obviously, seeking to eat healthier when you can is great. If you've got somebody that helps you with that, awesome. I didn't for a good while. And when you can't really make decisions very well and your executive functioning is down and out, it's a win when you can just eat. So when you remember to eat. So anyways, that's always good. yes, this upper cervical chiropractic care, it was different from NUCA. The way it had been described to me, and I'm not sure if this is completely accurate or not, but the way it had been described to me, NUCA typically works with your C1, and it seems like this specialized chiropractic modality that he used works with your C1 and your C2, I guess. So that's what they told me. Everybody, you can go research that, but it worked for a good while. And I would describe it as it brought relief and some healing, but it wasn't getting me over the hump all the way. And constantly throughout, I was seeking to work on emotions because ironically, the first injury I didn't feel angry about. I felt like, well, all right, felt sad, and all the emotions, but I didn't really resent that it had happened. It just felt like, all right, let's move forward. But the second injury, I had a lot of anger, and I was, for lack of a better word, I felt like flipping God off. Like I was like, what the heck? Like, are you serious right now? Anyways, so I was consistently seeking to better my emotions and through various avenues and ways. Meditation is always really good. For a while, I started recording my journals video because it was too much effort to write. That was one thing. I felt as if I had forgotten how to write. Everything that I did felt brand new, gross and fine motor skill wise. So like the first time I had to write a note, I started to cry because I was like, I know these letters. I know what I'm doing. How do I do this? And I remember my mom was sitting next to me. She's like, Kaylee, you know how to write. Just write it. And I was like, oh, just write it. And then muscle memory kicked in, and I was like, "Oh, okay."
It's possible to overthink things for sure.
But it also was like a disconnect too. Like there was a bit of a delay in my brain being able to connect to my body to say, "Hey, do this," and my body's like, "What?"
Yeah.
So
for sure. No, yeah, I wasn't trying to discount that. That I like, but it is cool how our bodies do store how to do stuff.
Yeah.
And nice that you were able to quickly do that. I think sometimes it doesn't happen as fast as that, but
let's see. So those tools were great. I utilize the spin technique, which somewhat I learned from neurolinguistic programming, which is a modality used to help in coaching or business formats or any format really, to help people with identifying their behaviors, their thoughts, their feelings, and ways and how to help them get to where they want to go in their life. And that was a modality from there, as well as my sweet, amazing father, who has been a trauma therapist for the last 20, 30 years, shared a unique spin to the spin to help that be more effective. And then I learned about creating a safe place internally as well, and various ways you can do that. And anyways, so
and these emotional, mental things were helpful physically for you. Do you feel like those made a difference for the shake and bakes?
Yeah, because eventually what I had to do was start to create and develop this resilient mind. So I couldn't just walk around scared that a shake and bake was going to happen all the time. And I couldn't walk around scared that I was going to get hit or something was going to happen. And so I started to develop this resilient mind of that concept of my body knows exactly how to heal. And if something happens, it'll be okay. My body knows exactly how to use that to help me further my healing rather than the opposite. So there's a lot more to resilience, obviously, but that's kind of the basics of what I started to work on. Because there's a lot of things physically that happen when your central hub in your nervous system is kind of tapped off. So like in the x-rays that had been done with the upper cervical chiropractor, he discovered that my foramen magnum, which is the hole where your nerves go through, was actually significantly smaller than most people's. And when they're inflamed, which is right where the injury occurred, when they're inflamed, it causes them to struggle to go through that hole, and which can also impact that shake and bake experience. And so went through that whole process as well. I mean, there's a lot of details to it, right? But yeah, that was something that was profound to me, and recognizing that when your nervous system feels like something is really off, you're going to immediately go into panic. You're going to immediately go into like terrified. You're going to immediately, like, that's just going to be automatic. And so being able to recognize those feelings and start to do some of those centering things. Like I know you've had Dr. Spangler on here, and she's a big fan of like using your five senses and using different things to help you. So like rubbing your arms and like, oh, yep, these are my arms. But sometimes that was too much for me, too painful during an experience. So it would have to be, well, I've been through this before. This is going to end eventually. It always does. Here we go. And there was always this kind of like clench in my gut. I could never fully get it all the way out, but I got to the place where I could, for the most part, remain calm. And that helped the situations that occurred. Helped quite a bit. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing all of that. You've mentioned, and we said earlier, we brought Brenda on to talk about orthobionomy, but it sounds like that has been something that's been helpful as well. So if people are hearing this and hadn't heard the previous one, go and I will link to that one as well. But go and listen to the orthobionomy one. But do you have anything that you want to say about that and how that impacted things for you?
Yeah, I found her because sometimes even the specialized chiropractic care seemed like somehow it was still too rough, even though it was like hardly anything. But I found her, she's flipping amazing at what she does. She has a very unique background working with a lot of high athletes and a lot of different types of injuries. Anyways, I found her through a sweet friend at Cognitive FX, actually. And I had what you'd call a setback and occur. And I went and saw that friend, and she started doing this technique with my neck that I was like, whoa, my body's responding great to this. What are you doing? She was like, oh, go see Brenda. And I was like, okay, thank you. So I got Brenda.
She wasn't twisting your neck. I just want to like throw this out there. She wasn't doing chiropractic on you, right?
It feels like a lymphatic massage with more guided direction is my simple-minded way to put that. But I noticed improvement. And when I first went to see Brenda, it was actually a lot for my body. And after my first experience, I did start to go into a little bit of a shake and bake as I got to my car. And she actually came out to my car and started working on helping my body let go of the shake and bake for the first time in her way. And it helped. Sure enough, I was able to like let it go, move on, get set, be good. And I was very impressed. So yeah, Brenda's over there at Brigham Young University and here in Utah. And so she's been extremely helpful. And then the other the other thing I started to do was I felt like my hormones were playing a role because everything's connected, right? Endocrine system, nervous system, everything's connected. So I found somebody who worked from a functional perspective on hormones. There's a lot of different types of people out there who work on hormones, and it's taken about a year. But in the last year, my shake and bakes have decreased so much that like, I don't think I've even had a shake and bake not a true shake and bake. I haven't had a true shake and bake in probably the last 6 months. Have I had like slight tremors? Yeah. Or like I had one day in June where I had to stay home because I was like, oh, I'm not doing very good. I'm going to just let that rest. But yeah, so I'm fairly stoked about it. And now I get to figure out how to help my body be okay with more exercise because that's what I want.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that journey with us and the details that you shared. And you brought up a bunch of the other things that I had been wanting to to touch on. So I appreciate that as well. I know we don't have a ton of time left, but I do want to touch on a couple topics really fast. Just curious. I know you and I are big fans of the ResiMax, and there have been recent. I've done some interviews with Sherrick Peck, the inventor of the ResiMax. So I'm curious if you have used it for yourself in relation to concussion symptoms or things, and if so, what has your experience been?
So I met Sherrick back when I first launched my coaching business. I went to the Brain Injury Alliance conference. And my dad was there, and my dad met Sherrick, and he was like, hey, you need to meet this guy. So I was like, oh, hey, Sherrick. I'm sure he doesn't remember. I didn't even remember for a long time. But we happened to purchase one of the ResiMax there. But this version of the ResiMax doesn't have all of the updated settings that this current one does. And so I had found that sometimes it would help, sometimes hated it. Sometimes it was like, I'd forget about it. But since having the updated Resimax that check, let's see, it was back in April, I think I got that. And so I have started using that. And I actually more frequently have started to use that for lymphatic function and things like that. Because as you go throughout these journeys, we learn the random little quirks our bodies have and how to start to help with various things and the ebbs and flows of life. So I have found it to be really helpful, actually. Whenever I've had any type of like digestion issue, I've started using that more often. It helps quite a bit. Or lymphatics, or I'll use it for my vagus nerve for vagus nerve stimulation. I noticed that sometimes if I do that one, I can't remember what the protocol is called, one where you like scrape your arms and then up around your neck. Mm-hmm. And when I do that one, sometimes it makes me feel awake and sometimes it makes me just feel like, wow, life is good. So it's increasing the parasympathetic, right?
That's awesome.
So yeah, I'm still learning with it, but I do really feel like that's also an important tool, that when you can find something that is an external tool that helps to teach your nervous system how to recover without having to just white knuckle it, that's crucial.
Yeah.
So
yes, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, really quickly, I know I want to bring this up because I feel like I've come across a few people who have had stuttering as part of their concussion experience, and I think it would be helpful for them to hear you speaking now and know that you did have stuttering as part of your concussion experience. Can you give us another like brief summary of how that went down and what you think helped as you're not stuttering now? So
yeah, after the first injury, that was when I had most of my major stutter. I hated talking. That was coming from somebody who normally was really at ease in social settings and good to go, but they were my arch nemesis. It was extremely painful to talk. And then when I tried to talk, I either got out the wrong words for what I was trying to express, or they came out completely stuttered, and it was extremely frustrating, embarrassing. I felt stupid, dumb, and extreme pain for the effort. And so for a good few months, I didn't talk much. And they did try to send me, I went to a neurologist. He was like, I got a mild injury, go home and rest will be fine. But the one thing he did do was try to send me to a speech therapist. And I went to that speech therapist and I mentally could not, I couldn't, because it felt like I was back in kindergarten. And I just couldn't. So I went home. So I had a couple of things he had given me, and so I tried to do some of those things. But ultimately, for me, I know everybody's journey is a little bit different, but for me, as I started to, because another thing that happened with that injury was I couldn't feel God in my life, and that was an even bigger hole for me. So I got to a pretty dark place with all of that. And I bring that up because it was a big role in my being able to speak. So I eventually had this experience where I slowly started to feel God again in my life one evening as I was pleading with him. And he slowly started to remind me of who he was and gentle and loving he was, which in turn started to remind me of who I was at my core. And that then eventually opened me up to start to be okay to be vulnerable with talking when I felt like I could, which the more I did it, the more painful it was at first. And then I got to learn to joke around a little bit because I'm a jokester. So I would joke a little bit whenever I'd make mistakes. And it was really frustrating to be on the phone and I'm giving a long version. I'm sorry, Bethany. Oh, shoot.
You're good. Keep going.
Because so many times people would just try to fill in the gaps for you, thinking they're helping, but getting something completely different out of that conversation than what you intended, which was really frustrating. My favorite people were the ones who just let me speak however I needed to. And they just allowed and treated me like I was exactly normal. And I had a couple of those. I didn't have very many. And anyways, so practice, essentially for me, practice helped. That and feeling God in my life again started to help me feel like I could be okay with starting to speak again. And then I had to work on emotionally recognizing that just because I couldn't speak well didn't mean I was stupid, or that what I had to say wasn't worth saying, because it was. So I had to kind of go through the emotional component. I also recognized that I could sing without stuttering. And so when I could tolerate the sound and the noise, I would allow myself to hum or to sing. And that would bring a little bit of relief for a moment.
When you say you've mentioned that it was painful to talk, what was pain? Like, was it physically painful? Was it like emotionally painful because it was so frustrating? Or like, what do you mean by painful?
So my brain, it would physically hurt.
Just because
the process of seeking to do it was extremely painful.
Like
for a good while.
Like it would trigger bad headaches. Is that like?
So like the pain would be in the center of my brain and go outward. And if I didn't speak, it would be low for a little bit. But the more tasks I did, whether it was speaking, breathing, looking around, like no matter what I did, especially at first, that pain by the end of the night would just be excruciating. So eventually it slowly.
Okay. Thank you. And I know that I'm curious, as you were practicing, like, was this all on your own, or did you end up working with a speech? I know you did work with a speech therapist at some point that you did feel was helpful. Was he involved with this, or was that a separate thing?
John. I love John. He was after the second injury.
Oh, okay.
At that point, I finally realized, right, been there, done that. It's worth it to just step in and say, okay, what's next? And he had some amazing tools. He actually had this whole brain recovery handout, like program thing that helped introduce a lot of things to me. That helped a lot. And he was the best.
Yay!
He was the best.
And I'm curious, I know you went to Cognitive FX after your first injury. Were you stuttering when you went there as well? Or do you feel like that made a difference at all? Just curious.
I actually, by that point, my stuttering would happen when I was tired or when I had a really bad headache. But for the most part, if I tried, I could stop it. So like still every once in a while when I'm really tired, it'll come out. But at that point, I'm like, oh, there it was,
Oh, must be time for bed. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. Man, there's so many good things. I could talk to you all night, but we will not do that. I will really, really want you to share your perspective on setbacks, especially, in this conversation, we've talked about a few of your setbacks or things that people could perceive as being a setback, right? I love what you share with people about that now, and I think it would be really helpful to have it out there. So tell us. What's your thoughts?
Thanks. So there's a couple of ways to look at it, but I chose to look at it as, well, I didn't just choose, I recognized every time I had a setback. So every time there was a setback and I was crying and emotional and like, what the heck did I do wrong? And what the heck did they do wrong? What's wrong with me? Why can't I improve instead of have these setbacks, right? All of the things that play into that. I realized after every potential quote unquote setback, I would progress like 30 steps further and it seemed quicker. And so I realized that these setbacks were a little bit more of a blessing because more often than not, when they occurred, I was either complacent in my recovery. Like, in other words, I wasn't really seeing a ton of improvement, but maybe very minute. And it was really frustrating, but I was like, I don't know what else to do here. And then something would happen that would feel like a setback. And then it would push me to ask more questions, push me to go more places, push me to figure things out. And then all of a sudden I'm peaking again and I'm recovering and I'm doing better. And I'm like, wow, I didn't even know I could get to that point. So it felt like a catapult. It felt like the setback was that rock that pushed you back. And then it helped you find the clinch pin that could pull out that catapult and push you 10 times further than you could have been without it.
Love that. I love that analogy so much. Thank you. The catapult analogy. It feels like you're going backwards, but it's really just setting you up to move forward faster. I think that's such a good perspective. So thank you for sharing that. And spoken from legitimate experience. So thank you. And yeah, I just love that perspective. All right. So tell us, I know we didn't leave enough time for this. We might just have to bring you back again. Sorry. But if we totally can, probably will, but why don't you give us a little bit of information? I know you're doing this really cool thing called BrainSparx, and I think that you should tell everybody about it. So ready to go.
I've been telling everyone it's my passion project.
Good. It's a good one.
BrainSparx is the nonprofit that I felt inspired to create. She's about a year old now. Our mission statement is to connect survivors with support through mentorship and support groups, and just about however we can, right? So you can access us at brainsparks.org. And through there, you can sign up to meet with a mentor who can be there. These mentors have either had brain injuries themselves and recovered to a place that they feel good about, or they have worked with people with brain injuries for a lot of years and understand. So I'm a mentor. Bethany's a mentor there with me. And then there's a couple of other people, and we're growing. So we're excited. But with that mentor experience, you can expect somebody to just provide support, a listening ear, and perhaps some resources or tools to help. And then support groups. I had started a support group a couple of years ago for teens and young adults in Utah County, and we're still going. It's for ages 13 to 32. They meet every third Tuesday of the month. But again, you can access that information on BrainSparx. And then most recently, we're looking to open up one in St. George. So as the need comes to us, we seek to help support providing that support wherever it needs to go. We're Utah based right now. We're focused on Utah at the moment. As we continue to grow, we're open. If you are listening to this and you live somewhere else, don't hesitate to reach out for a mentorship appointment. That's okay. We're happy to do what we can. It's simply there to provide support for those who need it, who are dealing with a brain injury, whether they are the support of somebody dealing with it or the person experiencing it.
Awesome. Thank you. And the support groups currently they're in person, or can people join from elsewhere?
Yeah. So the St. George group is actually going to be set up so that there's a virtual option every month, I believe. The Utah County one we try to let it be virtual as often as will be permitted. Sometimes we do activities where we're outside or something and it doesn't quite work. But every time we can, we do that. We have an Instagram handle for the Utah County one, and we are about to create one for the St. George one to keep people updated on that.
Cool. What's the Instagram handle for the?
Ooh, that's a great question, Bethany.
Is it like it's like TBI support or something? I remember seeing it recently, but we'll put it in the show notes. The go-to. Yeah, we'll definitely include that, the handle for Instagram as well as the website.
TBI support _Utah.
See, I was so close. Excellent. Thank you. And we'll put that on the show notes. Fabulous. I love what you're doing. I love how you're following those breadcrumbs. Like, I think God gives us like little things to help guide our way, and we can't see the full picture, but sometimes it is that the line from the song, "One step enough for me." I think that's how I have to operate sometimes too. So I appreciate you sharing your side of the journey of this and the things that have helped you. And I hope that this is helpful for people out there who are dealing with similar things. So thank you, as always, Kaylee. You're amazing.
Thanks, Bethany.
I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.